Like, we're close, but buddy, you're going to wipe your own tears, right?
It's a good thing we're so far away because I'd make you do that. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Geeks podcast. This is episode 227. I'm Brian Shealy.
I'm Ryan Joy.
And thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We are here on the heels of our Bible bracket for the favorite Bible verses here in 2025. And you all have spoken, and you have spoken loudly. This was a pretty exciting Bible bracket this year. Maybe a little bit more surprising than some years, I think. What about you?
No, absolutely. I mean, right from the first round all the way through, surprises. I kept thinking, oh, okay, this totally makes sense. And then, what? I did not see that coming. Like, there's not a wrong answer, but it's like, you just have certain things that you expect, you know, the scripty font things we talked about, or the, you know, everybody brings this up constantly. Everybody quotes this. We memorize this, but it's like, no, people are thinking this is where they want to go.
You know, and I think some of it has to do with the matchups too. You know, as you go along, you start thinking about one verse may really resonate on its own, but if you compare it to another verse, it's like, I would have a hard time, you know, choosing one over the other. And we had a lot of 16 seeds beat out 1 seeds, which were pretty surprising. We should totally roll right into our conversation here because as an icebreaker, I think we want to get into what was the biggest upset here in the bracket. What do you think was the one verse or set of verses that stood out to you as being completely unfair?
You brought up the round 1, 16s and 1. I think Psalm 23, verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. How many times do we say that? How many times do we sing that? And then the greatest commandment and mount up with wings like eagles, Isaiah 40 and Matthew, those two in the Elite Eight. When I saw those, I thought, okay, I know what the Final Four is going to be. And the two that made it, that kept going, actually, I thought, okay, yeah, John 14, that's there. And then Isaiah 40, and then the greatest commandment. And it wasn't. And so, you know, you think you know, but Bible verses just, they're Hebrews 4, they're living and active, you know? And so these words, like, they have meaning for people in so many different ways and so many different areas of our lives. I mean, you say favorite, again, we've talked about this before. Favorite sounds almost too small, but it's like favored, right?
Yeah.
These are verses that just mean so much to people. And it could be even that you're thinking, this is the verse I know, this is the verse I love. And then as you're about to vote, you read that verse again, like another one of the verses, and it hits you, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, I needed to hear that. And that's the word of God. You know, it's not like choosing like your favorite movie or your favorite color or something. This is what's getting you through the day. How have you overcome the toughest things in your life? What gives you joy in your life? And these words kind of have that surprising quality to them. So I think it's so appropriate, but so cool to watch. What about you? Where were your surprises?
Oh, man, I literally walked out into the living room one morning, and I was just shook. I told my family, like, John 3:16 is out. Like,
oh, man.
What?
Unbelievable.
I mean, that just felt like such a weird thing to say, but between Genesis 1:1, Matthew 7:21, Psalm 23, verse 1, and then clearly here, John 3:16, I really thought we would be dealing with a different Final Four, like you were talking about. But
are those the 1 seeds?
Yes. So those were the 1 seeds, and you know, looking at those options, it's like those should have been really, really far down to the Final Four at least. But none of them, not one of those, was down to the Final Four. So I thought we were going to be dealing with a different competition here, but. Like you said, I mean, verses hit people so differently at different times, and I think that's such a powerful example of the Bible's relevance for our everyday life. It's like something is going to be meaningful for you in the moment, and that will change, I think. So, yeah, having the scripty font on the walls really didn't buy some of these verses.
Or the sign at college football game day or something, John 3:16. It's like, yeah, that's everywhere, but it's not in the finals.
But it's not in the finals. So We usually start out our episodes focusing on something that Jesus said or a verse that helps get us centered on Jesus. But as we're getting into our winner and describing who our top 4 were in this competition, we're going to get to something that Jesus said a little bit later on with our favorite Bible verse winner. But before we get there, let's get into our first segment here on the episode, and that is Scripture du Jour.
What is the soup du jour?
It's the soup of the day.
That sounds good. I'll have that.
It does sound good. The scripture of the day. And so we're going to go through our final 4, ending with a little deeper dive into what Jesus said in the winner. But the first verse here in our final 4, this was from the Timeless Wisdom Regional, is Romans 12, verse 2, verse from my favorite chapter in the New Testament. That's the first reading I ever did in a church service, was from Romans 12, reading the chapter.
That's awesome.
And so this whole chapter is very meaningful to many of us. And we grabbed onto verse 2, and so did a lot of people in the voting. Here's what it says: "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." So what do you think about that being in the final 4, and what does that verse mean to you?
I love verses like this, and I think a lot of people obviously love verses like this. So many times in the Bible where we have not this, but that verses. Don't go this way, but instead go that way. And it's such a clear message that definitely earns a spot in the timeless wisdom, while also, I think, being a hard truth. You look at this verse and it's like, there's some decision to make here. So it's definitely a moment where you have to ask yourself, like, am I willing to be transformed, or do I instead give myself to be conformed to this world? And having beaten out so many quotable verses, I think that there's a lot of power in verses like this, where there's like this crossroad, right? You're clarifying 2 options, and, having a reminder like this, don't be like the world, but be different. I can definitely see why a practical verse like this would be helpful for people's everyday decision making, and why it made it so far. And aside from that, Romans 12, like you said, is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I like that you use the word practical. I mean, this is something you use, you face, you work with. And for me, a basic qualification for a great verse often is the imagery that comes to mind with it. And
sure.
These 2 words that sound the same, in English, conformed and transformed, give you some images of what it means to renew your inner life, renew your mind as God is at work in us and changing us. Did you ever watch Unwrapped, or like How It's Made, one of those shows where you're just watching the factories or whatever?
All the time.
Yeah. So like this gives me an image of like a factory. Maybe it's an Easter bunny chocolate factory where they're conforming these chocolate bunnies over and over again, right? Everyone is the same. They're shaped on this conveyor belt, and that's what the world is doing to us. It's trying to conform us to its own image. And so everything is fitting this mold. You feel the pressure. You feel every influence around you trying to make you into something. And then imagine on that conveyor belt, there's one piece of chocolate that's shaped totally different, beautifully. It's not like just a hunk of chocolate. It's it's a lion, or it's a lamb, or it's some other kind of a shape that is meaningful, but totally different. And somebody has taken by hand, maybe crafted that. It's like the chameleon versus the caterpillar, right? The chameleon animal is conforming. They are starting to look like, as much as they can, whatever is around them to blend in, versus the transforming of the caterpillar, right? As they go into their space of transformation and they come out of the chrysalis and they are something beautiful and different, and they don't creepy crawl anymore, they fly. And God is trying to make us into something in his image, not in the image of the world. And a verse like this just brings out all kinds of pictures and illustrations that we use to help us make sense of our lives. And that's really helpful to me.
Well, from chocolate assembly lines to critters and bugs, let's move on to our second verse here in the final four. Revelation 21 verse 4 came in our Precious Promises regionals and made it to the championship round, made it all the way to the very end. So this verse says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. I think I know why this verse made it so far. Why do you think Revelation 21 verse 4 belonged here in this competition?
Well, it's a picture of hope. It's something we sing about and think about a lot. And I think it's really personal. I think that in the midst of all of the pictures of the new heavens and the new earth in Revelation 21 and 22, and like I said, so many lyrics of our songs come from, and the things that we think about all the time, is this very touching kind of a picture of God personally wiping every tear from our eyes. Like, who in your life would you feel comfortable wiping the tears from their eyes? That's something you do for your wife or your kids when they cry and you're trying to comfort them, and you just put your thumb across their cheek and you are wiping the tears from their eyes and trying to give them comfort and trying to give them help and support. Like, we're close, but buddy, you're going to wipe your own tears, right?
It's a good thing we're so far away, because I'd make you do that.
And so when I think of that, I think of how, heaven isn't just like this great place that we go to. It's a place where we are so close to God that he is our comfort. And when I read this verse to my 7-year-old Evie, she said, but there are probably tears of joy.
That sounds like
There's no
Evie.
more tears.
Yep.
But maybe tears of joy. I thought that comment captured the new heavens and new earth pretty well. The end of the story, it isn't the destruction of the heavens and the earth. That's a part of the story. But the end of the story is the new creation, this glorious new place and time beyond places and times, where all is, as we sing, joy and peace and love, where God wipes away our tears. So I thought that was really a neat verse to make it into the finals.
I have never really thought about that part of the verse. And it's obvious, it's right there, right? He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Like, I've never actually really honed in on that particular picture of that verse. But I mean, you're totally right. Like, there's something so intimate and personal about it that I think resonates with me and resonates with a lot of people. But just that I focus on this verse and the idea that there's going to be no more of a lot of the bad things, right? Which is really, I think, the focus here. But that intimate way that those are brought to us, the careful and considerate and thoughtful, loving ways that's provided to us. Like, this verse is talking about our biggest concerns. And what do we fear more than death and crying and sorrow and pain? Like, all of those things being gone someday. It's about optimism, really. Like, in a world where there's skepticism and all sorts of fear and everything else going on, for a verse like this to just bring hope in such a clear way is beautiful, really. It's personal and it's meaningful. And for me, I may never have picked Revelation 21 verse 4 going all the way to the end, but I can see why it did.
Absolutely. The idea that there is something good and beautiful at the end of this story changes the way we live in the middle of it, right? To your point of optimism. Yeah. Okay, so the third verse that was in our final is from Psalm 118 verse 6. The Lord is on my side. I will not fear. What can man do to me? I think the brevity of the verse really helped that verse. When I was reading it to my kids as they were voting, just there's like this long verse, and then you get, the Lord is on my side. I won't fear. What is man going to do to me? And they're like, yeah, throw down. It's short. It's powerful. It's kind of defiant and bold that nobody's going to stop me. I'm with God. So what did you have to say as you think about that?
Well, it's really funny because you have been accused of picking some really long Old Testament verses here in this bracket, and you were accused of basically leading people because they were so rich and so full of picture.
Isaiah 40.
Absolutely. But then like we get to this verse and it's short and it's sweet and it's clear, and Psalm 118 verse 6 speaks very clearly to me in my like youth. I have this picture of like a scrawny kid on the playground who's gotten beat up his whole life and taken advantage of by bullies and stuff. And then one day
man, feel so bad for young Brian.
Oh man, one day he finds like the best friend being the biggest kid in school for some reason, like the abnormally large kid. And that kid now is standing behind him and he gets to stand with confidence in front of the bullies, right? It just reminds me that the Lord is the powerful ally. And I can see why this is a trust builder. It makes perfect sense. And when I'm looking at this verse compared to a lot of the rest of them, like you said, it's so short, it's so clear, and that message is so forward here. I don't need to be afraid when God is with me. What is man going to do to me? Really, like in the rhetorical sense, thinking about, God being on our side, our powerful ally behind us. When we all face stuff, it's like I can remember that I have the Lord who's on my side, and I don't need to be afraid.
I was just checking, and we have another verse in our bracket that sets up this verse as it quotes it in the New Testament. Hebrews 13:5 was in our trust builders, I think. Keep your life free from love of money. Be content with what you have. I will never leave you nor forsake you, he has said. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? So that's how powerful of a verse it is. It's a favorite of the Hebrew writer that's grabbing onto it to put it with another one of our favorites. What's that old saying? God plus one is a majority.
Yep.
Nobody else is with me. I'm okay. It's like easy to say, but I wrote a song about that once. I've thought about that so much. Like if nobody else is on my side, nobody likes what I'm doing, nobody thinks about it in the way I want to be thought of, but God sees me. You think of how God describes his servants through the years, David, the man after his heart, and have you considered my servant Job, and Abraham, the friend of God? Like if God is with you and he sees you as one of his, who cares about the rest? It's so helpful. And the whole psalm is really important. The Hosanna psalm, the one from the triumphal entry, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. This is the day the Lord has made. But again, the brevity, the clarity, the power of this verse brought it as far as it did. And I think for me, I wouldn't have even picked it. It was one of your draft picks. I wouldn't have even drafted it. But now it's got fresh play in my meditations and thinking. So I appreciate the way that this bracket kind of brings these verses from the community speaking to one another through the word in a way and saying, no, this is worth thinking about some more.
Okay, so, moving past all of the other winners or the other finalists here, we get to our champion. And the champion, if you hadn't guessed it or if you hadn't already checked already, is John 14, verse 6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's very, very clear, but it was the winner. And what do you think about John 14, verse 6, and maybe the reasons why you think that it won?
I mean, if you gave me 10 guesses, I might not have predicted this, the winner, but it's kind of perfect, right? It's kind of like it's memorable, it's short, it's famous. I think it's on In-N-Out wrappers or cups or something. Like this is a verse that people put out there too, kind of like the John 3:16, because it's pointing to the central truth that, we're going to talk about in our Square One series, that everything is about Jesus.
Yeah.
The whole Bible, the whole story of history, the whole story of everything is that Jesus is the way to the Father. And the Bible just keeps telling us, here's how you come to God. And It's interesting. I was thinking about how it fits into all of the regionals. It's a hard truth.
Yeah.
Because it declares the exclusive path to the Father, which is good news, but also hard news because anyone who doesn't look to him won't find God. And there's a lot of people looking elsewhere for God or just ignoring Jesus altogether. And then it's a trust builder. Like, who else would we put our faith in but the one who is truth? And it's timeless wisdom. It's offering us the path to life. This is like, if you're going to boil down some truths for people as wisdom they can live by, here you go. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the life. And then it doesn't exactly say a promise, but it definitely implies one, right? This precious promise that through him, we come to the Father and find life in his name. So I think it's very fitting that it ends up where it does. There's more to it, of course, and we'll continue to dive in. But I was just thinking how appropriate it is as the last one standing of the favorite Bible verses.
I think you're 100% right. You know, it's so multifaceted. This verse is one of the most powerful I am statements of Jesus in John. I think of all of them, I think this probably is one of the most declarative or powerful. And yeah, I keep coming back to that picture that you painted a few episodes back about the reduction sauce. Like I keep thinking about that in terms of verses like this. Like Jesus has to simplify down his message, his purpose into like one statement. This just boils down so much of his mission in like the most challenging way, right? It's so clear, but in just a few words, it's obvious that there's no other road but him. Like there's no other truth but Jesus. There's no life without him, and there's no door to God except through Jesus. Like he just lays the gauntlet down of like the hardest truth we can ever really settle in on is that he is the only one. There's no asterisks or caveats. Like you and I are prone to having asterisks and caveats with a lot of things we say. Standard disclaimers. Yeah, I think even at the bottom of our website, we have a little section down there about standard disclaimers. It's like, you know, of course, we've got things that we want to clarify. We don't always mean it that way. Or like, I mean, Jesus is real clear here. There's no asterisk. There's no need to like hedge or anything like that. He's the way, the truth, and the life. For us to really settle in on that fact is important and meaningful. And I can see why it won. It does, like you said, encapsulate a lot of the other verses that talk about a similar idea here, but it just puts it all together in a really beautiful way.
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of cool that it's Thomas asking the question here that leads to it.
Yep.
Thomas, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? You know the way where I'm going, Jesus says. You can come. I'm preparing something for you. Oh, we don't know where you're going. Did he say when I wasn't here? That's going to happen later when he's not there. She's going to show up. When I wasn't here, did he say where he's going? Because I don't know where he's going. And so I don't know the map. And Jesus says, I'm the map.
Yep.
I am the reality, the truth, the fact, the absolute. And I am the life. And it really does, as you said, the reduction sauce. It really gets to the heart of the message. Later on in Acts, we see that Christianity, they call themselves the Way. This is one of the names for the Christian movement, for the church, for disciples, right? Is we are part of the Way. But Jesus doesn't show us the way. Like, we're not going to follow his way. Like, what's the Mandalorian? You know, this is the way, right? Like they have a way of life.
Yeah.
Everybody does. There's like a way that this is the best way to do it. That's not what Jesus says here. Jesus isn't saying, I'm going to show you the best way.
Yeah.
He says, I am the way.
I am the way.
He's telling you the person to put everything on. He doesn't just tell us the truth. He is the reality behind everything that grounds everything. He's the true bread. Like throughout, you brought up the I am statements. The I am the true bread.
Yeah.
See, true is right there. Like you've had bread, but I'm the real bread. I am the true vine. I know, look around, there's vines. I'm the real vine.
Yeah.
He is the true everything, right? Because everything comes from him and everything points to him. He's the source, he's the grounding, he's the conclusion of everything. And the life that he is depends on no life-giving source. He brings life because he's the very essence of life. He's the power, the fullness, the goodness. And so there's just so much there to get that this person is all of it.
Yep.
And, like we talked about in our Ephesians guided study about how the end of history is for God to unite everything to himself in Christ. He's bringing everything together in Jesus. And so the Gospel of John has these ways of getting meta and saying,
yep,
okay, I'm not going to talk about all the details. I'm going to talk about the whole thing. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Mic drop, done.
I think mic drop done is really appropriate here. But, it's funny. In the context of John 14, there are so many heavy-hitting verses in this chapter, and even a few of them were in this bracket, right? This verse, this whole section of John, like you were just talking about, the purpose of John being to help us believe in Jesus, these I am statements being there to declare who Jesus is, this is all about getting us to understand who Jesus is. He's the good news. He's the one who's brought it all. And, if our series or this season is to be focused on the gospel, like we talked about a few episodes ago, I can think of no better verse really to highlight that Jesus is the one who this is all about. He's the focus. He is the good news who has brought us life and who's brought us the way. And a verse like this just highlights exactly why that is the case. So as we think about this verse and all the verses we've really covered here in our top 4 conversation, let us get into our final segment here on the episode, and that is our reach out question.
Reach out and touch someone.
Okay, so the reach out question is, which Bible verse in the bracket is a personal favorite that has made a major impact on you, and how has it made an impact on you? So this is about favorites. This is about personal selections. What is a verse that you have kind of grabbed onto and carried with you?
Yeah, for me, I think the conversation that we had during the draft about how many of these verses came from the Sermon on the Mount, I'm a bit shocked that we're not even talking about any of these verses in the Final Four. But with so many of our initial picks coming from that great mountain message, like I think when I go to Matthew 7, verse 4, is probably one of the verses that I picked tongue in cheek during the draft because I thought it was funny. But the more I think about it, this verse has had such a huge impact on my life. And maybe it's because it kind of came from a bit of a funny place that Jesus said, or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own eye? It's like verses like this are what Jesus does best, right? Pointing us to a basic, simple, fundamental truth coming from a place that we can all understand. And it's like anytime you get something caught in your eye and you're trying to get it out, that like there's almost nothing more important for you to deal with than to get that thing out of your eye. But for somebody to be so irritated by something that's going on in their own eye, in their own physical condition, but instead of getting it out, to be more focused on, someone else in that moment is ridiculous. And then compounded with the fact that it's not a speck in your eye, it's in fact a giant log in your eye. And so often I can just look at a verse like that and be like, wow, if only that person over there understood it. And it's something that I find myself prone to. I need to just remember Matthew 7, verse 4. Like, I got to figure out my own stuff first. Like, I got to make sure that I'm applying these things to me first. And then, if given the opportunity, I can help someone else and be a service to them and a blessing to them. But it just is a real kick in the pants to remind me to be reflective, internally focused, rather than, judgmental, outwardly focused, if that makes sense. And I like that this verse is impactful for me, but boy, I was disappointed that it didn't make it very far.
Yeah, well, I did a series, call it Game Changers.
Yeah.
And I'll take one verse or idea in the Bible, and I just talk about how if you just take this one verse and really apply it and really work with it, it's going to change so much in your life. And I did one on this verse, and it made a big impact on me to think about all the different aspects of life that it changes when you start to take things, because like listening to the word of God is at the heart of change, first of all. And whenever I'm looking at other people, pointing at others and seeing their problems, I'm not focused on the development I need to do. But this one truth of constantly coming back as not just first in chronology, but first in priority, working with myself and what do I need to change? And then as a secondary concern, then saying, okay, yes, I want to help you also. How can I serve you?
Sure.
But hey, I know I've got my own stuff. And so I love that verse. I was thinking of a verse in 2 Corinthians, this one that was a bit of a surprise favorite. It went a little bit further maybe than both of us thought it would go, but I think it connects with a lot of people. And it definitely has been helpful to me. 2 Corinthians 12:9. This is whenever he keeps asking the Lord to take away the thorn in the flesh, this messenger of Satan sent to harass him. He says, it's going to keep me from being conceited. And 3 times I pleaded with the Lord that it should leave me. And he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. This isn't what I was going to talk about. This isn't like the main thing that I want to say, but kind of a funny, little bit of a lighthearted thing, but it's real for me, is I have this cough that I get once a year, and it is...
I know this cough.
It is like, yes, Brian hates this cough. If you see me drinking a cup of tea here, it's trying to keep it together. Other people deal with much worse things, but it is really a problem in a lot of ways. But what I found is whenever I cough, it's when I'm stressed. It's when I'm spinning. It's when I'm anxious. I mean, there are other little things that can do it, but like 95% of the time, if I calm myself down, then I stop coughing. And so I have prayed so many times for God to take away this very small thorn in the flesh from me. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's a good thing for me, because it really makes me aware all the time when I am unsettled. And then I found myself in this period that I've been dealing with it. I found myself spending more time in prayer, quietly working through things with God. And then whenever I start getting caught up, I might be in a conversation with somebody, I might be stressed out thinking about something or whatever it is, I go back to God in prayer. And what am I doing? I'm letting his power be perfected in my weakness. This thing is drawing me to rely on him, to trust in him, to know that I can't solve all the things, and I don't need to get all worked up. I need to keep trusting in him and then do what I can, center myself in how can I be obedient right now? How can I be trusting right now? And this verse has a greater implications than that, of course. I mean, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to applying this. This is another game changer, right? That's why we picked them, because they're both game changers for us. But a couple years ago, 2023 was, I've kind of just to myself called it my hardest year ever. I used to call my 6th grade year my hardest year ever, because like adolescence is so hard, and I moved that year, and it was just really hard, and so I have compassion on young people. But 2023 kind of pushed that out, and in my own little bracket of what is the worst year of my life, it took the championship, and it was just a lot of things I was working through. We were working through a lot in our marriage, and I kept coming back to this verse, because I kept hitting my ceiling, like hitting my head on the ceiling of what I knew how to do, or what I was able to create and accomplish and change. And I just felt so helpless and discouraged. I kept trying and I kept at it, and I kept coming back to this idea, and it's stated in different ways in a lot of different verses. Isaiah 40, another passage in our bracket, the idea of waiting on the Lord, and you'll find strength when everybody else is tired. You're going to soar. You're going to be able, because you're trusting in God to be the strength, to be the source of life. He is the way, the truth, and the life, because he is the one that you're plugging into for this ever abundant source, and you're allowing your own shell of weakness not be the thing that you're trying to hold it all together with. It just changes everything about how you approach all of the challenges of your life, and starting to realize, this journey is my life. This journey is what I'm here to do. And the way is Jesus, right? The way I get through, the way I move forward is by trusting completely in him.
That
was
so
more
powerful.
of a sermon. Wow.
Yeah.
I just got going about my cough and then about everything else. Sorry there, but
here we go.
Yeah, so this is a really powerful verse for me.
I love it. Yeah, and I think we kind of, approach this from two different perspectives here, but both of these verses and many, many of the verses that we've talked through in this Bible bracket and here in this conversation, I think have been meaningful for people. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated, is just watching people's preferences get shown, watching the discussion about what people enjoy in various verses. We had a lot of people on social media reaching out to us and telling us verses that we should have picked or that we forgot about. And man, the Bible is rich and it's full, and there's no way to really encapsulate that in 64 slots. But really proud of the selections that everybody made this year, even though it was totally shocking in so many ways.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to some of those ones that were suggested and throw them out there in some kind of a scripture du jour or something. Here are some other favorite verses that people have given to us.
Love it. All right, so that wraps up here our discussion on the Bible bracket. On the next episode, where are we headed, Ryan? What's going on this season?
We're getting into square one. We were getting to square one. Now we're getting into square one. And so we're starting back with session one, which was one of our 3 checkpoints that we did an introductory walkthrough last season. Yep. And so we're going to start and just go through all 13 of the extended version of this. And so the first one is about what's not working here. What's messed up in the world and in us. And basically it's all about sin and how God gives us a name for our greatest problem and the source of all of our other problems.
Yeah, and so on the next episode, we'll get into square one, and then right after that, our plan is, Lord willing, to just roll through, like Ryan said, the rest of square one. You can find those conversations over at BibleGeeks.fm/square one if you want to get ready for that conversation. But this has been episode 227 of the Bible Geeks podcast. You can find us on our website, BibleGeeks.fm. You can find show notes for this episode in your podcast player of choice, or at BibleGeeks.fm/227. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can check out our blog for more details. We've got all kinds of resources there available. If you want to call into the show and have your voice heard, if you want to get included on this conversation, we would love it if you would go submit an audio question or an audio comment, or just tell us something over audio so that we can include it on the show. We'd love to do that moving forward. And until next episode, everyone, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Shalom.